from South Africa's economic heart. This is the Sandton Times Hour with your host,
Alexander.
Welcome wherever you find yourself. This is the Sandton Times Hour edition 251. It's week 28 of 2026. I'm Alexander Leitner, and to those listening for the very first time, welcome to you. Why don't you send us a text message, an emoji or a voice note, whatever you feel comfortable with, and I'd like to welcome you to the Sandton Times Hour Nation, and it's good to have you on board. It's also good to have our regular listeners on board in Sandton, South Africa, or somewhere else across the globe. If you're listening online or on air, greetings to you from the skyline and lens of Sandton in Johannesburg. Another interesting week has passed us with mixed emotions, and we look ahead at a month of July, and despite the cold, I hope that the next hour warms you up at least mentally. All of my preferred teams are out of the World Cup this past week, so kick things off with Bafana, and then it was downhill from there. So slim pickings as the 2026 FIFA World Cup ends the group stages and trickles down to the final top teams to take home the trophy. Well, let's see who that might be. Also, let me take this opportunity to shout out to my dad, who turned 92 this week, and I'd like to wish him all the very best health, peace, and happiness for the year ahead. What's coming up in the next hour? Well, for you, in a bit, we kick things off with our motoring feature, Sandton Drive, and we take a look at the GWM P500 in the Bucky category. More in a bit. Then I take a look at the South African outdoor advertising space and the removal of illegal billboards on our roads. You might have seen some skeletons of structures decorating some major arteries in our major cities, and I want to find out what happens next. As always, I then catch up with our regular entertainment commentator to take a look at the latest entertainment to watch out for this week. And finally, there's some fascinating data coming out of the world of social media and AI, and I'm going to share the findings of a bit of South African research on this front. Stick around, some good stuff to come. And I've got a great hour lined up for you. But as always, I'd like to hear from you. So if you want to get in touch, maybe drop us a line, and maybe we'll share your feedback on the show in the coming weeks. Well, you can send it through your questions, comments, and feedback on email, editor@sandtontimes.co.za. You can connect on social media at Sandton Times, and then use the WhatsApp number 084 Sandton. That's 084 726 3866. 084 726 3866. And it'd be good to hear from you. As always, I'd like to remind you that you can also join the podcast community, so make sure you subscribe to the Sandton Times Hour on all major podcast platforms, whichever one you prefer. There's tons to choose from, and you can catch up on previous discussions, interviews, chats, and so much more.
online,
On air.
anywhere, anytime.
This is
The Sandton Times Hour.
So South Africa's Bucky market has never been more competitive, and established favourites are facing increasing pressure from a new generation of manufacturers, bringing fresh technology, premium features, and very aggressive pricing to the segment. Among them is the GWM P500, which has emerged as one of the industry's biggest contenders, having claimed the title of South African Bucky of the Year, and now returning with a bold styling update that reinforces its premium ambitions. To take a look at the P500 and what it has done in the local market, how it stacks up against its established rivals, and whether GWM is redefining expectations in the Bucky segment, well, I'm joined by Sean Nurse, motoring editor at Auto Trader South Africa. And Sean, welcome back to Sandton Drive on the Sandton Times Hour.
Always a pleasure, Alex. Thank you for having me.
So, Sean, both you and I have test-driven the GWM P500. You drove it quite some time back. It's been in the market for a little bit of time. It won South African Bucky of the Year. How significant is an accolade like this in influencing buyer confidence, particularly when you're a new player in a market like South Africa?
Look, I think it makes an enormous statement to win an award like that. And I think a lot of what went into that vehicle winning the Bucky of the Year was it brought a lot of new things to the Bucky market that I shudder to think, but by now, just a year or so later, are kind of par for the course. But it was one of the first Buckies to introduce a hybrid drivetrain, that split folding tailgate, a sunroof in a double cab Bucky. And there's some proper off-road accolades that have come with these P300 and P500 models from Australian journalist testing. So the Bucky brought quite a lot to the segment for the amount of money they were asking. But The crazy thing, as I mentioned, is a year and a half or so later, everyone is sort of caught up, and there are way more rivals for this product now than there were back then.
I mean, the thing with Bucky's in South Africa is that it's more of a mechanical purchase than an aesthetic purchase, because we know most Bucky drivers in South Africa are either in agriculture, mining. There are the odd, drivers who might take it to Tasha's and back. But for the most, people are looking to use this as a workhorse. How important are these cosmetic enhancements in the greater scheme of things? Because people aren't really buying it just for the looks.
Well, I think it depends on which segments of the Bucky market you're looking at. So the Hilux is the best-selling Bucky in South Africa because it leans very heavily into the commercial aspect of it. So Toyota sell an awful lot of single cabs to the mining industry and to other commercial partners like plumbing businesses or whatever sort of business you can think of. Whereas Ford is very good at selling their double cabs into the lifestyle market. And that's kind of where I see this P500 leaning. It's got that same American-esque styling that you would get in the Ranger. It's appealing to the pure lifestyle owner, someone who values the aesthetics, values the features of the Bucky versus the more agricultural side of the Bucky. But as I mentioned earlier, we are now at a point where there are so many competitors in this market. You've got this real perfect storm for competition where you've got established brands like Ford and Isuzu, who are by far and away the best-selling Buckies in the market. But now you've also got newcomers like the P500, like the BYD Shark 6, that are new energy competitors emerging from China that showcase how much value can be packed into one product while taking it to the established brands. They don't seem to have cracked the code in terms of sales just yet, but it certainly is a wake-up call for the establishment.
Well, I think you've touched on it now, talking about this hybrid technology, the P500 HEV, which brings this new energy segment into the Bucky space. I know some manufacturers are saying, it's not worth it, too expensive. We can't really sell electrified Buckies in South Africa, and others have really embraced it and have leaned all in. What's your take on the situation at the moment? I'm assuming things like this crisis in the Middle East and the petrol and diesel price would have probably changed skeptics quite quickly.
Well, I think the narrative for Buckies is changing quite rapidly. Of course, there will always be, I think, at least in our lifetime, a business case for a diesel Bucky, particularly in South Africa. It's very hard to replicate their reliability, towing capacity, and the ability to be worked on and fixed in many areas when compared to a hybrid or a turbo petrol. But at the same time, there's a great business case now for petrol Buckies because diesel is more expensive than petrol. Best example I could give you is you could take two identical Volkswagen Amaroks in terms of, it's fairly similar in terms of pricing, but the same model, a Panamericana 3-liter turbo diesel V6 and a 2.3-liter turbo petrol. And because of the current fuel pricing, the petrol is actually cheaper to run than the diesel, which is not something we would have ever said in the past. And leaning into that even further, these hybrid Buckies, the P500 potentially not the best example of that because I didn't find it particularly light on fuel. I found it to perform very well, but I didn't find it to be terribly efficient. But the idea behind these hybrid Buckies, at least, is to provide almost zero emissions driving in a city scenario, but then eliminating that range anxiety when you do the whole lifestyle off-roading family vacation type of thing.
We know with the Bucky segment that badge status is probably higher than I think any other segment. What you drive almost as important as what you do. Do you think that the GWM P series as a whole, I mean, including the P500, starts to change that narrative a bit? That more people have said, well, I used to be a Toyota driver, I used to be an Isuzu driver, but I actually think that this is almost as good as what I'm getting, what I've received in the past.
Look, I think the first P series that came out, I was at that launch just coming out of the pandemic. And I think that Bucky changed a lot of people's perceptions as to what a Chinese light commercial vehicle could be. They weren't just this workhorse that you could buy as a cheap alternative to the established brands for your business. It was something that you could genuinely use as a lifestyle tool. So I think the initial P series and potentially the P300, this P500's baby sibling, that is certainly something that I think a lot of people are looking at and saying, I could definitely take this as an alternative to the established brands. But I think the P500, because it finds itself in relatively rarefied air at the sort of R1 million mark, I think it's a slightly tougher sell as the hybrid than the P300, because while there is a lot of kit and a lot of features here, you can get a lot of other options for the exact same price. If I run you through a list, Ranger V6 double cab sport 4-wheel drive, the new Hilux, you can get that in Legend 4x4, guys, and for about 10,000 Rand cheaper, you can get a BYD Shark 6 for the same price as this HEV P500. So it is quite a tough sell, this particular variant, but I think GWM has gone a long way to changing perceptions, and I think it is seen as a viable alternative to many other brands.
Yeah, the GWM P500. Been good to chat about it, and of course this whole segment with Sean Nurse. He's the merging editor at Auto Trader South Africa. And Sean, it's been good to have you on the Sandton Drive on the Sandton Times Hour again.
Always a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Back for more.
The Sandton Times Hour continues.
So over the past few months, Johannesburg has witnessed one of the most notable crackdowns on illegal outdoor advertising, with the city removing around 41 unlawfully erected billboards and counting. And it's intensifying its enforcement against what the city says are operators flouting municipal bylaws. And if you've driven around parts of northern Johannesburg, you would have seen it looks a bit like a skeleton alley with all these structures that are now standing bare on private properties, on the side of the road. And it's obviously affecting not only the planners, the people who've had to put the advertising on these spaces and believed that there were spaces that legitimately were allowed to showcase this advertising, but also the brands who've now been caught up in photography and social media posts having their very expensive artwork taken down. And this campaign by the city of Johannesburg has reignited an important conversation about accountability, fair competition, public safety, and the future of South Africa's out-of-home advertising industry. While the actions have targeted illegal operators, there's also a spotlight that's been shone on the many legitimate media owners who have invested in compliance and tried to uphold an industry standard. Well, joining me is Angelo Tandy. He's the chairman of the Out-of-Home Media South Africa. This is an organization providing strategic leadership, governance, and advocacy for the country's out-of-home media industry. And Angelo, welcome to the Sandton Times Hour.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's good. I think it's a much-needed conversation that's been coming on for a very long time. And as you said, there's a shaking or awakening that has happened. And it's something that we have to address now and address with urgency.
Well, Angelo, let's get your reactions to the city's enforcement campaign. I mean, it's been almost relentless. I mean, there's almost every month we see a release coming from the city of Johannesburg saying that they've taken down more illegal structures, things that weren't supposed to be on certain corners, advertising certain brands. How do you as an organization react to this?
We are in support to an extent as to the removal of unlawful structures. It's something that we've been asking for years, We've had indabas, we've had various meetings, we've had sessions where we sat in rooms with each other. And as you said, rightfully so, legitimate operators are feeling the pain. First of all, it squeezes the pocket. There's illegal operators that have messed up the rate card and literally just brought about a whole lot of clutter. So the call has been declutter, restructure, and probably I'm going to use the word heal the industry. It's a beautiful sector. It's a key sector. It deals with in communications, and it's the one medium that you can't put a pause button on or fast forward and that. And the illegitimate or illegal traders have just come and eroded the industry. So it's definitely, we're in support of that. I think what we're not in support of, it's the way it's done, because it doesn't only affect the illegal traders, but it also affects the legitimate traders that have worked, that pay their fees to municipalities, that have teams out there that are working hard every single day. And if everybody's brushed with a blanket approach, it does bring destruction to business confidence. And so the way the municipality is doing it is definitely an issue.
Is this unique to Johannesburg? I mean, obviously Johannesburg has got an incredible amount of out of home. I mean, if you look at the fixed billboards, then you've got these hoardings, which are these sort of temporary structures that are put around construction sites or around houses. Then you've got these trailers that are parked on the side of the road where they've removed the wheels, but they're sort of there temporarily. Is this just a Johannesburg issue, or are you seeing a similar thing unfolding in other cities in South Africa as well?
No, it's not unique. It's actually happening throughout the country. If you look at many other municipalities, the same is happening. Rogue media owners or that have come in without the proper consent, that do not operate within the ambits of the law. They come, they put up these structures. Many of them don't, and you'll see, I mean, one of the first signs that you look at, there's no nameplate on the board. You know, you can't identify who it is. Like what you're saying, there's wheels off, a trailer is left on the side of the road. So they are not compliant with the bylaw, and so hence that happens. So it's happening throughout the country. And so what happens, it starts like a bushfire. What happens in one municipality just spreads out to the rest of the municipalities, and it then becomes difficult to control. We do find cities like Cape Town have been more strict and have dealt with law enforcement and removing those structures and those boards as they come up. So, and I think the suit is now following in the city of Joburg, where they are now making a statement and saying we are tired. We are really tired of this here. Thanks.
To take people behind the curtain, the proverbial curtain of the out-of-home and advertising industry, behind these billboards that people see outside, when they're driving around, is an advertising agency or a media planning agency that has booked that space through an operator to have whatever advertising put up on there. How has this now impacted that relationship, and is that industry in conversations with you to discuss how this is booked? Because surely this must have really, to use a very colloquial word, freaked people out, because they've now booked, a space that's worth hundreds of thousands of rands on behalf of a big brand, and they're now having to account and explain to that car manufacturer or that alcohol brand or whatever why their massive and expensive billboard has been removed from the side of the road.
So I think an important thing to note, we've started the discussion or the conversations. In fact, just yesterday, we had a meeting with the city of Joburg, and we're looking at doing a digital blockchain asset register. So something where municipality, the city, the industry can have access to what is lawful and unlawful. So that's one of the calls that we are asking for. Yes, there has been an erosion of the relationship, but we also know that some of the challenges that have caused this year is having fraudulent paperwork. Okay, and there's no way of getting past that there. But to have a asset register that's widely published, that agencies and brands can see these are legitimate boards. It's something that we've called for a long time. And obviously the municipality or the city had to go back and look at that there. There's also been, and that's the reality, they may not have the staff or the infrastructure to put many of these things in place, so it will take a long while for them. But we've come up and we've said to them, we've entered into an MOU we are busy concluding an MOU with the municipality. It's sitting with their legal. And what we're trying to do is to have a working relationship that's governed through an agreement. Okay. So in that there, I believe it will start building confidence again. A media owner will have the same sight as a media agency to what is legit and what is or unlawful. So I believe, even though we're in pain now, and we as a joint industry, that we're all part of this here. So you can't leave the media industry out, and we're all part of it. Because if we really just done our work better and looked into things deeper, or if we had access to each other more freely, we wouldn't be sitting in this place.
Well, I think there's still a bigger conversation to be had here, and I think there's still a lot to discuss, but we're going to watch this unfold. And Angelo Tandy, Chairman of Out of Home Media South Africa, thank you for making the time to be on the Sandton Times Hour, and I look forward to picking up this with you again in not too distant future.
We thank you for inviting us on to this here. I think it's a very important conversation, and as you said, there's still a lot more to unfold. as we go into a new future with new tools, with new ideas and concepts. But I believe it's an important sector that needs to be protected. Thanks to your listeners, thanks to you.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thanks so much, Angelo.
Thank you.
Connect with the Sandton Times.
Email editor@sandtontimes.co.za.
As we head into the second half of the Sandton Times Hour, my name's Alexander Leipner, and a quick reminder that if you caught anything on the show this week that you might want to discover a little bit more about, but you didn't manage to get all the details whilst listening, well, don't forget to visit the website for the show notes, which we endeavor to try and get up on the site as soon as possible. And there you'll be able to get some links, some further reading, some further details that you might have missed. And as always, let me remind you to also get hold of the podcast by subscribing to it on your favorite podcast platform. Then also the social media accounts at Sandton Times. Make sure you're following those and save the WhatsApp number 084 Sandton. That's 084 726 3866. And feel free to send through your voice notes, text messages, and whatever else you'd like to send through. And that's the exclusive Sandton Times Hour WhatsApp number. Well, time to connect to Tat Wolfen on our regular entertainment slot. And Tat, before I hand over the mic to you, I just have to say I had a chance to catch Disney on Ice in Pretoria this week. I know it's heading to the rest of South Africa in a couple of weeks, and it was magical. I had a wonderful afternoon watching all the Disney characters come to life. I think the kids had a better time than the adults, although there might have been some adults who had a better time than the kids. A really special show, and I know you're a big Disney fan.
Yeah, I've been to a few of those Disney on Ice shows, and I think the best way to do it, obviously, is to take kids with you, even if they aren't your own. You know, borrow a niece and nephew or something and go along, because shows like this need to be seen through the eyes of children, I think, and hopefully they aren't jaded children who are glued to their electronic devices. But yeah, if you take kids along who really, revel in the wonder of it all, then I think it just makes the experience so worthwhile.
Yeah, certainly an activity to consider for the school holidays that are upon a lot of parents at the moment. Talking about ice skating, from one story we skate to another, and you had a chance to watch Solo Mio at the cinemas.
Yeah, well, from one, let's say, family-friendly activity to another, there's a movie just opened on circuit called Solo Mio, as opposed to O Sole Mio, which is a very famous opera, the music of which does crop up in the soundtrack of this movie. And this movie soundtrack is just packed with Italian music and songs from hundreds of years back to right up to date. And wow, what a pleasure. So it stars Kevin James. It's a romantic comedy, and I'm not really a fan of rom-coms, okay, because they're so formulaic, and it's always this guy with a chiseled jaw and a six-pack abs, and the girl is just like stunning, model, gorgeous, and all that kind of stuff. Well, this isn't that way, because as I said, it stars Kevin James, and he's this slightly overweight, friendly kind of guy. But what I love about Kevin James is, he's your everyman. He's not this kind of unattainable thing that most people can't hope to be. He's just like your ordinary bloke. And without giving away too much, I mean, the very premise of the movie is that he proposes to his fiance. They're both teachers at the same school. He proposes to her, and they decide they're going to have this romantic wedding in Italy. So everything's all planned, and it's going to include like a bit of a holiday for them. So their honeymoon is they're going to get married in this lovely old church in Italy, and then they're going to, tour around on these what do you call the bicycles with for two? You know what I mean?
Tandem.
Yeah, tandem bikes. Thank you. So after their honeymoon, they're going to go on this tandem tour of Italy on their bike, and it's just going to be all fun and roses. What happens? She doesn't turn up for the wedding.
Oh.
So his beautiful Italian wedding just falls apart.
Mamma mia.
The movie takes off from there. But what a lovely movie. Firstly, the Italian scenery, you've got to tick that off, okay? Well, actually, as a first, I put in Kevin James because he's this lovely sort of everyman kind of character. Then there's a beautiful Italian scenery. Then there's this wonderful soundtrack of Italian music, and then there is the most beauteous Nicole Grimaldo, who plays this woman who works in the local coffee shop. And I have to confess, I've never heard of her before. But she is a lovely looking gal. When I say a gal, she's I think in her early 40s. But what a beautiful and warm actress. So, the movie is just a delight from the beginning to the end. It's funny, it's romantic, it has every ingredient you need for escapism. And, a lot of people say, oh, I don't go to the movies anymore because movies are junk these days. And I'm sorry to say that they're actually quite right. Most movies these days are junk. They're unimaginative, and the studios just look back into their catalogs and say, okay, let's do a remake of this movie. Let's do a sequel. Let's do a prequel. It's going to the movies is well, with most of the releases these days, is not an exciting new experience. It's just like, we've seen this, we've done this. They've tweaked the story slightly, but it's the same characters, the same stories. And in the case of Solo Mio, yes, it is a rom-com, and rom-coms normally follow some kind of formula, but the cast is marvelous. Oh yeah, and you'll even have in in a co-starring role the great Andrea Bocelli. Now, he's gone quite grey since last I saw him, but then again, who hasn't gone grey since last I saw them? But he's just like the cherry on top of this incredible, romantic, funny Italian fairy tale.
That's fantastic. Well, there you have it. Disney on Ice, some good feedback from me. Solo Mio, some good feedback from you, Tat. And I think that's just about as much time as we have to cover some of the entertainment for this week. So I think there's some good stuff to go and watch.
Solo Mio, not to be missed. And I look forward to chatting to you next week. Cheers, Alex.
You're listening to the Sandton Times Hour.
So for the past 16 years, the Social Media Landscape Report, developed by Ornico, has helped South African marketers, communicators, and business leaders understand the platform's behaviors and trends shaping digital communication. And this past week, the team brought out this new report together with Worldwide Works, and at the same time, Google hosted its Google Cloud Summit in Sandton. It's the first one in South Africa and the first one in Africa. And it's quite fascinating how both of these events came together in the same week. And there's some incredible findings. And there's a person you won't find too far from these kind of discussions. It's Arthur Goldstuck. He's the founder and CEO of Worldwide Works. And Arthur, welcome back to the Sandton Times Hour.
Thanks, Alex. It's always good to chat to you.
Arthur, what were some of the highlights of this year's Social Media Landscape Report, particularly those that surprised you?
Well, we first saw a rebound in the number of people using social networks across the board. So the sample frame, to just put it in context, is from a survey that Ask Africa runs twice a year. It's called the Target Group Index, TGI survey. And that interviews a total of 24,000 South Africans, so highly statistically reliable. But what was really interesting was to see how massively TikTok came up amongst consumers, and then amongst businesses, how LinkedIn leaped to the fore. We actually saw that last year already, but this year it really reinforced its position as the most commonly used social platform amongst corporations. So to give you an idea, last year, 85% of corporations were using LinkedIn as a marketing vehicle. And that meant that it overtook Facebook for the first time, because the year before, it was only 72%. That was 2024. And Facebook at that stage was on 78%. Facebook grew last year to 83%, and then LinkedIn to 85%. So it overtook it. And Facebook this year dropped back to 79%, whereas LinkedIn kept growing and went up to 85%. It's the platform that people take most seriously in the business world and now also in the marketing world. And interestingly, we saw TikTok drop back in terms of business use and the large brands using it as a marketing vehicle. That was on the corporate side. On the consumer side, it was interesting to see the extent to which Facebook recovered after it seemed like it was going to drop back. So last year, it had dropped to 56% of adult South Africans. And it showed that that from 2023 to 24, the proportion of adult South Africans aged 15 and above had dropped from 59% to 56% using Facebook. So we thought it would drop further, but in fact, it recovered to its highest penetration yet of 61.8%. But the big story actually was TikTok, which kept up to its relentless rise. So 2023, it was on 34%. 2024 went up to 38%. Bear in mind, we're reporting the previous year's stats because this is from the 24,000 questionnaires or interviews conducted in the course of last year. This year's study is still underway. So last year, TikTok showed that it had gone up from 34 to 38% in 2024. In 2025, it shot up to 47.9%. That's a massive rise of an already high base. And that tells you it's coming after Facebook as the primary social platform in South Africa.
I think you've touched on this to some extent, but as there's always winners, there's also losers. And one of them, I think, that is starting to lose ground is X, formerly known as Twitter.
It's an interesting one because they didn't drop back so much as stay in place. So from 2023 to 24, they went up from 18.8 to 19.1%, which is very small compared to TikTok, for example, and even Instagram. It's still significant. It's still the fourth biggest social platform. In 2025, it went up to 19.9%. But when you look at the growth that is reported by Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and also LinkedIn, one could argue that Twitter or X has remained stagnant. And its growth is so small that we can expect LinkedIn to overtake it in the coming year or during this year. So LinkedIn went up from 12.2% 3 years ago to 15.8% 2 years ago to 19.3% last year. And that's breathing down the neck of X or Twitter, and X not making a lot of progress. So that was fascinating. The other fascinating one, by the way, that may also take on X, which I would never have predicted, is Pinterest. And that 3 years ago was on 9.9%, then 12%, and last year 15.6%. So if it was able to maintain that growth rate, it would overtake X in the next 2 years. I don't see it. I don't see a mass appeal for Pinterest, but then again, I'm not an active Pinterest user. I am a user. I have a bunch of boards on Pinterest, but I very seldom find a reason to go back there.
I can echo that sentiment. I mean, I suppose if you're redoing your home or you're planning a wedding or trying to find some inspiration for your next holiday, maybe. Otherwise, I would also struggle to find a regular use for Pinterest. But one thing that I did find fascinating, this is maybe where it overlaps with our conversations at Google Cloud Summit in Sandton this week, is this fascinating move that social media has become the new search engine for current affairs and news, and no longer the likes of Google, Bing, whatever other search engines people are using.
Well, there's two kinds of search engines that are now taking over. The one, as you mentioned, social media. And I do believe the reason for the resurgence of Facebook and the maintenance by Twitter of its position, and then the rapid growth of LinkedIn, is that people are using these platforms to find their information and their news. They're following news channels on these platforms, and they're also getting breaking news. X is still very good for breaking news, not very reliable, but very good for breaking news. But interestingly, TikTok is becoming more and more of a news channel as well. So for people who are already on social media, that becomes their de facto source of news. And in terms of company news, LinkedIn becomes the de facto source. When it comes to search beyond the social platforms, when people simply want to do a search, they are more and more turning to AI to do so. So they're using ChatGPT or Claude or Google Gemini or Microsoft Copilot, less so Copilot. But I would say Gemini and ChatGPT are becoming almost search engines as much as they are AI tools that people are using.
Well, some fascinating findings there in the 2026 Social Media Landscape Report, and also some of the discussions had at the Google Cloud Summit in Sandton. Arthur Goldstuck, he's the founder and CEO of Worldwide Works, and thank you so much for making the time to chat on the Sandton Times Hour.
Thank you, Alex.
Thanks, Arthur. And time for us to wrap up the Sandton Times Hour for another week. And feel free to send through your questions, comments, or feedback. You can email editor@sandtontimes.co.za. Connect on social media @Sandton Times. Hop onto the website, www.sandtontimes.co.za. And don't forget the WhatsApp number exclusive to the Sandton Times Hour, 084 Sandton. That's 084 726 3866. And feel free to send through your voice notes, text messages, and more. Also, make sure to subscribe to the podcast and join the growing digital community there. Pick your favorite platform and do so for Nix Mahala for free. And thank you to all my guests who made time to be on the show this week, as well as the team behind the scenes making it all happen. A very special thank you to you for listening, and God willing, we'll do it all again next week.
The best of talk and music in 1 hour.
This is the Sandton Times Hour.